Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith. Today we're going to be playing through the very first part of Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. We set up the entire gameplay in the last video, so if you haven't checked that out, be sure to go back and see how the game is set up in very quick time without any rules references whatsoever. Going through this very first part, it's going to be a learning experience. I'm going to blend in how to play Arkham Horror with the first round of the game. This is going to give you a general idea as to how things work, and then as we go through the game, you'll start to see some of the nuances and the one-off scenario type things that we'll hit, and those rules will come into play at that point. We'll explain them then. Thank you so much for joining me, and without further ado, let's get into Arkham Horror. One thing I'd like to mention right off the hop here with this playthrough is you're going to see a bunch of components that don't come inside of the base game. They're usually made of a totally different material than cardboard, and these are actually really cool accessories from Top Shelf Gamer, ones that I picked up for Arkham Horror the LCG, a game that I truly love, and they're fantastic in that you can actually bring them over, at least some of them, into Arkham Horror 3rd Edition, as well as Eldritch Horror, Mansions of Madness. I typically will grab the brains, which is used for sanity, and the hearts, which are used for health, and bring them into all of the Cthulhu-based games that I play for the most part, as many as that actually fit the theme as well as fit swap out or proxy of a component. So I just want to mention that if you happen to see some components that weren't in the setup, that's because I'm interchanging those with some of the Top Shelf Gamer components because I truly love them and it just adds to the theme. So now let's take a closer look at the investigators we have going on here for the Approach of Azathoth scenario. So Agnes Baker is one of the investigators. She's a waitress and she has two abilities at the top left of her card. It says blood casting. You may suffer damage instead of horror while casting a spell. So again, a little bit of control there over how much sanity she's going to take, or horror in this case, and I might use those terms interchangeably throughout the playthrough. She also has Blood is Power. So while casting a spell, if you suffer damage or spend remnants, which we'll talk about later, which is a token that you can acquire in the game, you get +2 on your lore. So that's handy because her lore is one of her best and strongest traits, so to have that skill be boosted even further is awesome. Underneath of that, it says things ain't always what they seem, and that's very true of Agnes Baker. She looks harmless, but she's very powerful. So we have a focus limit of 2. And with the focus limit, how that works essentially is you have a whole bunch of skills. So all the skills below are lore, influence, observation, strength, will. You'll be familiar with those from a number of different games, especially from Fantasy Flight, where they use them continuously throughout those games. Eldritch Horror, Arkham Horror, the LCG, all that kind of thing. So basically these are your skills. What a focus limit pertains to is the number of tokens that you can actually use to focus a particular skill to gain a reroll in that skill. But you can only have it max a certain number of those focus tokens on your character. So every character is going to be a little different. Agnes's focus total count or limit is 2. She can't ever have more than 2. And she can only ever have 1 focus token per skill. You can't have 2 tokens for lore. Agnes Baker. So first off, on her starting possession, she's got a couple things she gains right away. She's got some money, she's got an heirloom. So both those things she's going to get without any kind of discussion whatsoever. She has to have them to start. So this is a particular item right here, and it says after you cast a spell, you may focus 1 skill of your choice. And we just talked about what focusing is, so that's going to be really handy. She'll be doing that quite a bit through the game. The next thing we have to decide on is there's a choose one at the bottom here. It says Storm of Spirits or Flesh Ward, and I threw it back to you guys to find out which of the two would be the best for her to go into this playthrough with. So first off, I'll show you Storm of Spirits. This one here is a spell incantation. You may test your lore in place of your strength as part of an attack action, and the monster's attack modifier still applies. Pretty good, because in her case, her lore is very strong. So it's almost like beefing up or giving her a really good weapon at the start. Or she can go into this kind of a mode with Flesh Ward, where she can do another spell incantation, and once per round, if you, another investigator, or an ally are on any space would suffer any damage, you may test your lore and prevent the damage equal to your test result. So that's super powerful. Now you'll see in the bottom right there, she will suffer some sanity damage for using this, but the risk reward is really good. And I didn't actually note that on the Storm of Spirits. That would happen as well in the bottom right. So those are the 2 cards, and I went to you guys to ask you which one would you choose, and by far Flesh Ward won out. So Flesh Ward is going to be the card that she begins with, along with her heirloom, and of course she's got $3 to her name. Now we're going to take a closer look at Agnes's backstory because we want to learn more about the investigator and what she's all about. Agnes had been troubled by dreams and visions, robed figures, incantations, keening monsters clawing at the edge of sight. But a while back, she fell and hit her head, and since then the visions have come in her waking hours. She sees herself, leading the chanting of the robed figures, hiding a silver key in the masonry of a well, conjuring spells as a sorceress in the mythic land of Hyperborea. Seeking an explanation, Agnes came to Arkham, home of the storied witch trials and other strange events. She took a job at Velma's, and then one day she found an old well with loose masonry, and she found an old silver key hidden inside of it, exactly where she knew it would be. Now let's learn a little bit about Agnes's roles. So she has a primary role as well as a secondary role. First off, primary, she is a mystic and she is adept at warding against evil. Her focus should be on removing doom from the board, and she is the best defense against the Ancient Ones. So she truly is a very powerful character within the Arkham story. Secondary role for her is a guardian, and it's her responsibility to protect fellow investigators. That could mean helping them from recovering from trauma or dispatching monsters before they become a threat. So she really is an all-around package. So our other investigator going into the fray is Calvin Wright. He is the Haunted, and his action is Friend Indeed is what it's called. For an action, he can exchange any amount of health and or sanity with another investigator or ally in a space. His quote says, "I'll sacrifice everything to keep you safe." So he's going to be our aggressive character. Of course, he's very balanced though. He's a 6 and 6, so he's the same as Agnes Baker in terms. So we have some really balanced characters that way. No one's really any stronger in sanity than they are in health. For stats, he's solid across the board except for will. Will is his weak point, so if we were going to focus, it might be a good idea to focus in his will area just to kind of get that up there. But at the same time, he's very balanced across the board. As I mentioned, he has a focus limit of 2, same as Agnes, so I believe, if I remember playing a couple other times, I had one with 3, so it is possible to have individuals that have higher amounts of focus, but in this case I have 2 characters with focus of 2, so we can upgrade or have rerolls, I should say, on tokens for 2 different skills, which is pretty handy. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to flip this card over on its back, and we're going to take a look at some of the starting possessions, the story, and also some of the roles for Calvin. So on the back of the card, Calvin Wright's starting possessions is going to be a dagger, until the end of time, and $3. So let's get those cards ready. Now I pulled them out during our setup, but I'll show you exactly what they do now. So here is the Spirit Dagger. So this card is going to be Calvin's, and it's an item. It's a magical item, and it gives him 2+, or +2, I should say, on his combat as part of an attack action. So that's very good. And you get +2 lore as part of a ward action. So that's a really good card. Next up, he's going to get until the end of time, and it's a condition which is considered innate. It's a very, very cool artwork on that one as well. This one says, this card cannot be discarded by any means, including damage and horror. It has a reckoning ability here that says remove 1 damage and 1 horror from this card. I'll talk more about how this card works when we actually get into the gameplay, but I just wanted to show you the cards up front. Where it gets interesting is I shot it back to you guys as to whether or not I should go ahead and do an optional thing here with his starting possessions, which was both Voice of the Messenger and a Dark Pact condition. So in other words, he gains this card if he takes a Dark Pact condition. There was quite a bit of comments on this one, and a lot of people were for it, and I would say almost the same amount of people were against it. So it's very interesting that way, but let's take a look at the condition itself. It says you may suffer 1 horror to re-roll any number of dice. That seems really useful. It also says use this no more than once per roll, and this allows you to re-roll the die rolled for your Dark Pact. So that's kind of cool too. So you're allowed to even re-roll this when you're dealing with your Dark Pact stuff. So in order to take this card, I have to take a Dark Pact. And guess what, guys? You pushed me over the edge. I'm going to take a Dark Pact at the beginning of the game. That's right. It's not exactly the best thing to do, but it's a gamble, and it gives you a very strong ability out of the gate that hopefully will be useful for us. So I'm going to take this card, we're going to add it to his pile. We're going to now reveal the Dark Pact condition that we're going to get from the top of the deck, and let's see what we got here. So it says, when the reckoning begins, and it also says never look at the back of the card. That's another thing I want to mention with Arkham Horror here. You don't want to be looking at the opposite sides of cards, just in general as a rule, unless the you're in that particular phase or that effect is actually triggering. That's really important, and it actually is very similar across all of the Arkham Horror, Eldritch Horror, those types of games. You don't want to be looking at both sides of the cards like you would in some other games. And it even reminds you of that right there on the cards. Do not look at the back of this card until you are instructed to do so. So the Dark Pact condition here has a Reckoning ability here that's going to trigger. It says roll a die when the Reckoning happens. And on a 1, your debt has come due. Flip this card. This die roll is not a test. So again, I can use the voice of the messenger in order to re-roll the die for my Dark Pact conditions. So technically, it's kind of keeping it at bay. So it's kind of worth it, and I think it'll be fun to roll on that and see whether we can survive it. But now I've got all the cards for Calvin, and on top of that, he's going to also have $3 to his name, so these guys aren't going in super rich. And then, of course, he's got his activation token off screen set to the enabled side. And now let's talk about the roles. So right here, we've got roles for each of the characters. What is Calvin's focus? So Calvin is considered a guardian. So Calvin is going to be responsible to protect fellow investigators. That means he's going to have to help them recover from trauma or dispatching monsters before they become a threat. His secondary role is a rogue, and we don't actually have rogue ability yet, and that was not something on Agnes's card. And it says as a rogue, you have unique skill set that allows you to specialize on a specific task. Calvin is adept at healing the trauma suffered by others. That's really good. You can use this to keep yourself alive through disaster. The hardest thing Calvin has ever done was to walk away from Jahal, who had been there making all the times before easy. But he had no choice. The vision, Jahal burning to dust, the world blasted by light, the darkness within himself. Calvin couldn't let it take his beloved from him. So he removed himself from the equation. He struck a bargain. He let the cult of the masked god think that they could control him and waited for the moment to strike back against the ancient evil that threatened the world. It was a hard time, but knowing that Jahal was safe made it easier. It wasn't that Calvin wasn't afraid. He was, but he knew what had to be done, and that he was the one man who could do it. Alright guys, so we're starting into the playthrough now, and we're going to begin with what's called the action phase. During the action phase, there is a number of different things we can do, but we're performing 2 actions, and you can perform each action no more than once per round. While engaged with a monster, of course, you can only focus, attack, or evade. So that's one thing to note. When a monster is engaged with you, which means it's come off the board and is in front of your character's sheet, it is considered engaged with you, and at that point, you're restricted on the actions that you can play. So we'll see here on the reference card that the action phase is at the very, very top, then the monster phase, then the encounter phase, and then, of course, the Mythos phase, as in all of these games. Player actions are on the back, which are super helpful to give you an idea as to what you can do on your turn. And these are all the different actions, and there are also actions on your character's player board as well. And there can be actions on your player's card. So Calvin Wright, for instance, has an action for his Friend Indeed ability. So I can spend one of my actions that way. Remember, though, I can only ever do one action once. I cannot double it up. So in other words, I cannot, move twice, essentially using 2 move actions. So first one up, let's talk about movement, because that seems like the most appropriate one to begin with. So you can move up to 2 spaces when you do a move action, and you can spend up to $2 to move that many additional spaces. So you can basically spend another $1 to move once more, or $2 to go 2 more spaces, because whenever you make a move action, you move 2. So it basically allows you to move double if you have the money to do so. Again, you have to have the cash. So that's kind of a cool thematic thing. You can think about it maybe like, technically he can, in a certain period of time in a round, he can only move twice on foot. But let's say he has the money to spend, he grabs a cab and he gets to that other location. He gets even further into Arkham. So it's kind of cool, very thematic that way, that he's paying money. So I kind of get where they're going with that one. Gather resources is just simply, literally just gaining $1. So we're not actually sure what they're doing. We don't know if they're drug dealers or what their background is, but apparently to gather resources, they literally just get money thrown at them. So you can imagine the things that they're doing for their dollars. I'm not going to get into that. So we have focus here, which is the next action that can be taken. It says 1 skill of your choice. This is where I talked about those tokens that you can get, and I have them just off screen here if I can grab them. they look like this, and I'm not going to pull them out of the bag just yet, but they're all in a bag, and they're basically going to allow you to do re-rolls on particular skill checks, which is awesome. So you can do that up to your focus limit that we talked about earlier. We have the ward actions. You can test your lore to remove doom equal to the to your test result from your space. If you remove 2 or more, you gain 1 remnant. That's how you gain those remnants. And what are those remnants? What do they look like? Well, I'll show you what they look like. We'll talk more about what they are later when we run into them. But remnants look like this. So you'll gain one of these tokens if you happen to do the ward off successfully. Now, the other purpose of the warding, which is very, very important, is to just simply remove doom from the board. You can see we got doom right here in the unvisited isle. You don't want doom to just accumulate in places like crazy. If you do that, anomalies can start happening on the board, and that's when really all hell breaks loose. There's a whole bunch of other bad things about that, but I'd rather talk about it when it actually happens. But essentially, doom is bad, and doom's always been bad in every single Arkham Horror-based game, especially the LCG we've all come to know. Doom can also sit on your scenario cards or what's considered your codex area. So we have those 2 cards that are underneath the scenario card. So we have anomalies. We're going to have to read this one. So Doom can actually not only just be put on the board in the game state, but it can also be taken and put on single cards, which can also trigger nasty things. So that's what warding does. Basically, it's your management against Doom. You have attack, which is pretty straightforward. You're going to engage a monster in your space, test your strength to deal damage equal to your test result, and the number of successes rolled, of course, is that test result. Evades. So if you want to evade a monster so that you don't get stuck in those situations where you can only do specific monsters when you're engaged. Again, remember earlier when I said if a monster's engaged with you, it comes off of the game board, and we have some of these robed figures actually on the game board right now. So if it ever got engaged with Calvin, say, I'd flip this card over and put it in front of him, and he's considered engaged by that robed figure. So in order for him to do any other actions besides the ones that are listed right here in the action phase, because you can see at the bottom it says, while engaged with a monster, you can only focus, attack, or invade. That's all you can do. You can try to evade in order to get past that particular monster, and if you do successfully, then you actually get to perform an additional action, which is pretty awesome. So it actually is worthwhile to attempt to evade, try to. Of course, there are particular not spawn cards, but there are particular effects that may hurt you for trying or things like that, but you kind of have to see based on whatever character you're trying to evade from. Another action here down at the bottom says research. Test your observation to place clues equal to your test result on the scenario sheet. So once you have clues in your possession, which you can gain by knowing that certain areas have a clue marker on them, if you're looking to go to the merchant district, if you remember from the setup, the merchant deck right here had a clue card shuffled into the top 2 cards of the deck. We don't know where it is, but essentially you are going to try to find that particular card during the encounter phase, try to gain the actual clue by successfully doing the check, which is typically a skill check. Once you have the clue in your possession, which means it's on your player board, then you can spend what's called a research action to do your observation check, and if you can successfully test it, you can then place the clue in your possession onto the card that you're trying to complete from your scenario. Or it could be a card that's coming from the codex area, like this one right here with Anomaly. So this one here actually is a perfect example. Anomalies is one more so for the Doom. So it says right here, when a space has 3 Doom or a neighborhood has a total of 5 Doom, place an anomaly in that neighborhood. So that helps you understand a little bit more about the Doom there. We're going to read more about these cards as we go along, but I have another card that specifically states more about what we're trying to do, which is called Deja Vu. And this card right here says, when there are 3 or more clues on this scenario sheet, add card 4 to the codex. So this is what we're aiming to do. I will be reading these just before we begin our actions, but that's what that research action is all about. We're trying to place the clues that we found at the locations that have clues, like even the north side here. We're trying to find those, encounter them, successfully do it, gain the clue, and then use a research action to put the clue we've gained onto the scenario sheet in order to move on. This is very similar to Arkham Horror LCG in the mindset of moving past or moving to the next step of the story. So for those of you that played that game, this is going to come very easy to you and the understanding of it. Lastly, here at the very bottom, we have some other actions that you can do. Trade. So you can exchange any number of possessions with other investigators in your space. This is something that's always been a part of every single one of these games. Some components have actions on them. We already talked about that. Player boards, cards, all that kind of thing. And while engaged with a monster, you can only focus, attack, and evade. So it's again reminding you, don't forget when you're engaged, you're limited in what you can do until you evade it. So that's it. That is the basic understanding of the flow of this particular action phase. So actually, we should probably begin this phase, and maybe we'll start it off with one of our two investigators. I'm going to take a few seconds to figure out which one I'd like to use first, and we're going to move right into it. So the scenarios in Arkham Horror are very, very cool in the fact that you actually don't know what you're trying to do to win the game. Now, over time, you'll become familiar with the system or formula that will lead to a potential successful conclusion, but every single scenario is going to be built in a way that you have to follow through the codex cards that are being provided to you in progressing the story to find out how you're going to actually win. So the first time you play one of these scenarios, you'll be a little lost as to what you're actually doing, except for the obvious, which is remove Doom from the board, get rid of monsters, and start beefing your characters up. But slowly the story will start to unravel, and you'll start to understand where you need to go, what you need to do, and of course, gaining those clues on those scenario cards are huge in progressing that story. Now in the codex here, we have two cards, one of which talks about Doom tokens and one of which that talks about the clues that you need to put on that card. So we're going to look at those close up again to find out more about them. The first one's card number 2 for the scenario Approach of Azathoth, and it says at the very top that people walk with their heads down, shoulders hunched. With each new oddity, it becomes harder to pretend that nothing is wrong. But the vanishings, the strange lights, the sightings of inhuman creatures, they are not something that can be ignored, at least not for long. Okay, so there's a whole section right here for Doom, and you'll see that there's a little Doom icon beside this section. It says when a space has 3 Doom or a neighborhood has a total of 5 Doom. So a space is like this. There's 1 Doom here. If there's ever 3, an anomaly is going to show up. If there's 5 on this particular board, anomalies are going to show up. So that's pretty nasty. So really, you could have 2 here, 2 here, and 1 here, and that would be enough for an anomaly to show up in this particular neighborhood. But you could also trigger it by just having 3 in one space, if that makes more sense. If additional Doom would be placed in a neighborhood with an anomaly, then place that Doom on the scenario sheet instead. So that's just flat out bad, because if you have more Doom accumulating on the scenario sheet, that's going to trigger nasty things too, and you're really getting yourself into trouble at that point. You can think of anomalies in the same vein as gates from the previous Arkham Horror games. They're going to function a little bit differently in this edition. Obviously, they're not the same. It's not as generic as just spawning a gate randomly. In this game, it seems to be targeted based on your mitigation of getting rid of the Doom. Like, if you do not get rid of those Doom tokens, then an anomaly will show up there. Whereas with the old Arkham, it was like draw a card or a specific game effect would trigger a gate spawn. So it's a little bit different in how that's done in this edition. At the very bottom of this card here, it says, if you would resolve an encounter in a neighborhood with an anomaly, you resolve an anomaly encounter instead. So that's really important to remember. If an anomaly shows up on the board right here, for instance, and they look like this when they actually get put out on the board. If one gets placed here like that, and you happen to be in this area, you're going to actually, instead of doing an encounter for that particular area, you're going to be going ahead and doing an anomaly encounter. Because it says, if you would resolve an encounter in a neighborhood with an anomaly. So that means any of these spots. So the anomaly could be, it's going to show up and it's obviously going to trigger in the area that it spawned. And it'll land right in the center here. So it'll actually be placed right dead center. So it'll affect all 3. I shouldn't have put it here actually. But it'll affect all 3 of the areas by the anomaly. So if you're trying to do an encounter in any of these spaces, you'll do an anomaly encounter instead. At the very bottom of the card here, it says, when a neighborhood has 0 Doom, remove the anomaly from that neighborhood. So that's another way it can happen. If all the Doom is removed, then the anomaly can be removed as well. Also, if you do an anomaly encounter, there's a chance you can actually have it removed that way as well. Okay, the other card is card number 3 for Deja Vu, and this one is the more positive side, the progressing of the story. So let's find out what this is all about. The day dawns, the color of hammered lead with the stillness and chill that settles over the gabled roofs of Arkham and lingers. As you go through your morning routine, you cannot shake the feeling of having done it before. The same breakfast, the same headlines in the newspaper warning of disappearances and odd goings on, and a note in your handwriting reading, "The Demon Sultan approaches," or Damon Sultan. I never had to know how to say that properly. Meet at the train station. Okay, so clues here. It says, when there are 3 or more clues on the scenario sheet, add card 4 to the codex. Do not remove this card from the codex, though. And doom-wise, when there are 3 or more doom on this scenario sheet, flip this card. Ugh, not good. Okay, so that's something to make note of. So there's doom effects there as well as progressing the story. But now we at least know how the story is going to progress and what we need to do, and that is to get clues. And those clues happen to be in the north side, in the merchant district, and downtown, which is all in close proximity to our heroes. So now that we've covered all of that, and we now probably should look at this one sheet right here, the approach of Azathoth. We are going to be moving into the playthrough so fast here. It says the story so far. At the center of infinity slumbers Azathoth, lulled to sleep by the ceaseless piping of accursed flutes, yet some mortals would seek to draw the infinite power and calamity of the blind idiot god to them, and thereby doom all of humanity. So for each cultist monster, place 1 doom in its space. If it's a street space, place the doom in an adjacent neighborhood space instead. So that's something we're going to have to deal with as part of the reckoning. All right. Okay, so we covered all the narrative for the start, and man, am I excited for this. I have no idea whether or not I'm going to be able to pull this off, but we're going to try our best. Thank you guys so much for bearing with me through the first part of this video, because now we've gotten all the investigator stories out of the way, the scenario stories, the codex stories. We went through a run through of all the actions you can take during the action phase, so I think it's time now to actually move into the very first round of Arkham Horror. I think I've decided who I want my leader to be. So my leader is going to be Agnes Baker. So she's going to have the flashlight activation marker. So for the first turn, I'm going to have Agnes move from the train station to the Arkham Advertiser, as I want to try to get rid of that doom. So what I'm going to do now is going to do a ward test, and we're going to try to ward away that particular doom token. Okay, so Agnes is using her lore, which is 4. So she's going to grab 4 dice. I do have the Arkham Horror, the classic Arkham Horror dice from the original game, which is awesome. These don't come inside the box. These are separate, but you can pick them up from Fantasy Flight. They are kind of tough to find now. I found that they don't really get stocked in my local store all that often, and they usually have to special order them in, but they're fantastic, and they really do mix into the lore of the game really nicely. They also show successes on 6 with an Elder Sign and 5s. And of course, if you get the Blessed and Cursed dice, which I did, then if you gain the Blessed or Cursed condition, which you can actually gain during the game, Blessed allows you to basically get successes when rolling on 4s, which is pretty awesome, or Curses, which is the worst thing ever, allows you to only count 6s as successes, and that's pretty nasty. Of course, you can actually gain that condition throughout any different types of effects throughout the gameplay. Here is a curse dice of the same thing, so 6 is the only one that's actually got the Elder Sign, or you can have the blue for the Blessed, where 4, 5s, and 6s are all successes. So they're pretty cool, but we're only going to actually use those if we ever get Blessed or Cursed, and I'm really hoping Cursed never happens. So we're rolling 4 dice. Here we go. We just need one of these to be a success, because we only have 1 doom to remove. It says, when you ward, you remove doom equal to your test result from your space. If you remove 2 or more, you gain a remnant. So I'm not going to be able to remove and get a remnant in this case because there's not 2 there, but I'm just going to remove this for now in order to just not deal with this, because I plan to try to go after this clue on this turn and then leave this area of the board for a long time. That's my hope anyway. Okay, I just barely got that. I got a 6, so I am successful, which means I can remove 1 doom token. So that's good. That's all I really wanted to do. And that is going to conclude Agnes's turn. So this would work pretty good for Calvin's turn. I could do a very similar move with Calvin and try to go after a different clue from a different area. And he's only 2 spaces away to being in this area, so he could potentially have a chance of getting a clue, plus get rid of the doom token. So let's do that. Let's have him go 1, 2 for his first movement, and then he's going to go ahead and try to get rid of that. Now, he only has 3 dice in his lore, so this may not happen, and he's not going to gain any type of remnant from doing this because it's not 2 doom tokens. So here we go. Nice, a 6/6. That's way more than enough to get rid of that 1 doom token, so we're already off to a good start. So now we're going to move into what's known as the monster phase. And in the monster phase, there's a couple things you need to know for the first time through. First one says each ready monster activates. So if we have any readied monsters, we'd activate them now, and we do. We have 2 robed figures on the board, so we will be going ahead and activating. And it says a monster that moves into your space engages you. So that means they're going to come off the board and go right towards the investigator card, or onto the investigator card, or maybe just above it to show that they're engaged with you. And then each exhausted monster is going to ready. So if you've exhausted any monsters, and how that works is if you've evaded somebody, or you've, so essentially if you invade a monster that's already engaged with you, it goes back to the game board, but in the exhausted state, which is flipped, which means instead of it being on the black side, it would be exhausted on the white side. And then at this point in time, it would flip back up. So right now we don't have anybody that has ever evaded any monsters yet, but we do have monsters that need to activate and move. All right, so it's time to move and activate our monsters. So we have robed figures here. There's a 2 right on their card, so that means they're going to get a movement of 2, but where are they going? So the patrol at the bottom of the card says move toward the unstable space and engage the highest influenced investigator. So first off, we're going to move this 2 spaces, but in what direction and where are we going? So this is considered a patrol monster, and monsters like this with a patrol move are going to move toward locations instead of investigators, and they're going to go towards places with the most doom or the unstable space. And there's basically a section in the rulebook that talks about the unstable space. It's basically a beacon for paranormal activity, the space marked with a doom icon on the top of the event card in the discard pile is the unstable space. So in order to figure out which one that is, you go to your discard pile, and we only have 1 card which got discarded at the very beginning of the game when we set it up, and you look for where the doom icon is, and there it is right beside Hibbs Roadhouse. So that is going to be the unstable space for this particular round. Hibbs Roadhouse is way up here, so that's where the robed figure is going. Now, what's really crazy about this is that you can see that's going to become a very high area of concentration for these robed figures. So this robed figure is going to move from the Black Cave, he's going to go 1, and he's going to move to the police station. This other robed figure, which is in the Independence Square area, is going to go to the streets, and he's going to basically head to either Velma's Diner or the police station. So I'm going to put it at Velma's Diner. Basically, it's going to be quite interesting because we're going to have a lot of, we're going to have a lot of interesting stuff going down in the East Town. But that is going to be it. And the only other thing that would happen during the monster phase is if there was any of these monsters on the board that happened to be on the board in their exhausted state, they would turn to their active state at this point. But we haven't evaded anyone, so there's no exhausted monsters currently. Now our investigators are going to move on to the encounter phase, where we're going to draw and resolve an encounter matching the space unless you're engaged with a monster. Neither of our characters are engaged with a monster, so that's good. We're going to go ahead now, and we're going to actually resolve encounters. So let's do this, starting off with Agnes here at the Arkham Advertiser. So that's on the north side. We're grabbing a card. What do we got? Oh, no way. Did we get the clue right away? We did. That's awesome. Okay, so there was like a 33% chance we get that because whenever a clue spawns, it goes into the top 2 cards shuffled in, and there's 3 cards total, and one of them's a clue. The other 2 are not. We got it right off the bat. That's awesome. Now we have to do this based on which one it is. Oh, but you can see going... Oh, look at that. It's got the doom marker beside it, too. Okay, so Minnie Klein is desperate for a good story. You may spend 1 remnant to show her something that will wow her. If you do, she shares her findings with you and exalts over your evidence, finally making it all click together. You gain $3 and 1 clue from your neighborhood. Oh, so I'm not going to be able to gain that at all. So that's... Oh, so I need to have a remnant. So... Okay, so that's something to note. Like, that's something that I now know about what I need to do. So what happens now is because I could not do this, this card doesn't get discarded. That's a very, very big point within this game. You'd think that this card would just get tossed. What actually happens is you take the top 2 cards of the deck whenever it's a clue card that's drawn, and you shuffle it back in. The reason for this is because now you know what you have to do, and this is how the story is evolving over time. You don't know when you're going to have the right item to solve that particular part, or to gain that clue, but you know what to do now. And now I know I need a remnant, and I've got to go back and get another encounter in the north side. So that's going to resolve Agnes's encounter. Next up is going to be Calvin's encounter. He's got an encounter in the Merchant District. So the Merchant District is this one right here. We pull the top card. I did not get a clue on this one. That's too bad. He is currently in the Unvisited Isle. So I'm going to go ahead and read this to you guys, and we'll do this check. So a bit of digging reveals a mass grave. Oh, I don't know why he's digging around right now. We got to save the world, man. Okay, so we're using our will for this. Oh no, our will is 1. That is not good. So I'm rolling only 1 die. Here's hoping this pans out for him. Oh my gosh, I got it. All right, so it says, if you pass, you search through the remains and discover several inhuman creatures. You gain 1 remnant. No way. So we got a remnant already from this card, and now we know that we need a remnant up at the north side. So it looks like Calvin's gained a remnant token, which is awesome. That worked out. I wish that had happened first, because we could have run up there. Well, I guess we couldn't have run up there this turn, but at least we have that. So that's awesome. So now this card will be returned to the bottom of the Merchant District deck. Next up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do the Mythos Phase. It says you draw 2 tokens from the Mythos Cup and resolve their effects one at a time. All investigators do this in player order. So Agnes is starting it off. We'll grab our Monster Cup, which is this right here, this bag. And I'm going to actually have a special guest pull out the tokens for us. Our special guest today is going to pull from the Mythos Cup. What are you going to get there, Sren? Grab it. Grab something. This is for Agnes. Make it count. Okay, look. Can you see them in there? Get one. Oh, she might have got one. What did you get? Let's see. Oh, that's bad. That's terrible. What's the next one you're going to get? Oh my goodness, you've gotten way too many. Okay, put those ones back in. Put those ones back in. Okay, so she's going to do this one at a time, and whatever one's left over is the one we're going to have to deal with, I guess. Drop them in. All right, we got our winner. It's right here. It's a clue. Good job. That's a good one to get. All right, so we got 2 for Agnes. Let's resolve these in order. So first one looks like the anomaly, and then the clue after that. Okay, so the first token that Serenity pulled out was this. It's considered a gate burst token. That's really not the best thing ever. Now, the thing to remember with these tokens, when they come out of these bags, do not put this back inside of the bag. That's right, Serenity. Don't put that back in the bag. So we're going to keep that outside of the bag, and then once the Mythos bag or cup has been drained, then you put all them back inside. That's a huge thing to remember. Okay, so for the Gate Burst, resolve a Gate Burst by taking the top card of the event deck and placing 1 Doom on each space of the corresponding neighborhood. So let's do that first. The first one at the top of the event deck, which is that cool tray that we got, it was a Rivertown. Yeah, I've already put myself in that position. So now we're going to go ahead and put a Doom token on each of the locations here. Okay, so we're going to have a Doom token that's going to go on the Black Cave. We're going to have a Doom token that goes on the Graveyard, and a Doom token on the General Store. So we are 1 away from an anomaly if the Black Cave was to get another Doom token. Then we're going to shuffle the card that we just got. We're going to shuffle that card that we just pulled out, which is this one right here, and the entire event discard pile together, and place them on the bottom of the event deck. So now we're going to take this 1 card from our event discard. We're going to add it to the card that we just pulled, and those 2 are going to be shuffled and put back into the event deck. The next Mythos Cup reveal was a clue, which is one of the positive things that can happen in the game. This one right here. So this token, we are going to be putting a couple things on the board. We're going to spawn 1 clue by taking the top card of the event deck and placing 1 clue token in the area in the center of the corresponding neighborhood. So we're going to come over here to the, oh, look at that, Merchant District. Awesome. So we're going to be putting a clue, another clue token in the Merchant District where Calvin is. So we're going to go ahead and place another clue token in the Merchant District. Now there is 2 of them in there, which is awesome. Double the chances. And we're going to take the card that we revealed from the event deck in order to put it there. And we're going to take the top 2 cards of the Merchant deck, and then we're going to shuffle them all in together. So I'll do this off screen, and we'll be all squared away for Agnes's pull. All right, so Serenity, you're going to pull for Calvin now. Grab 2 out of there. They're in there. Do you hear them? Okay. Put your hand in. See what you get. Did you get one? Okay, that's a whole bunch. So which one is it going to be? You give me the one that you're going to pull. That one, okay. Oh, that's bad. And that one. Oh, okay. So a nothing and that thing. Let's go find out what those 2 things are, all right? Okay, so we got the 2 Mythos tokens from the Mythos Cup. The first one that got pulled by Serenity is... Can I see the first one, please? Hand it over. Thank you. First one is this guy right here. This is what's considered a spawn monster token. So you're going to spawn 1 monster by drawing the bottom card of the enemy deck. This is really, really important because if in most other games you're typically drawing from the top of the deck, but with the monster deck you're drawing from the bottom, because if you were drawing from the top, you'd already know what's coming at you. In this case, this guy. So we're going to draw from the bottom, and we got... That is not good. We got this guy right here. We got a servant, a monster. Ugh, that does not look good. And it says spawn at street nearest the prey. It's a hunter. Move toward engage investigators with most clues. So we're going to be going ahead now and spawning this at the street nearest the prey. Technically, that's going to be either this location or this one over here. So I can choose in this case because it's in relation to Calvin's pull. So I'm going to actually have this one go, maybe, I'll have it go here. So I can deal with this on my own. I don't want it as close to Agnes, so that Agnes has time to deal with the north side stuff. So that's where I'm going to put that. And then the other token that Serenity pulled was this one right here. It's a blank, and these are nice because it gives you a nice little break from the action. Nothing good and nothing bad happens, so it's just basically a blank, which is nice to have every once in a while. And that's going to do it, guys. That is a full game round for Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. We went through Action, Monster, Encounter, and Mythos phases. Serenity got to jump in here and help us out. We also covered a bunch of rules. So now what we're going to do is we're going to end it right here, and going into the next part of our playthrough, we're going to pick up the speed in these turns. We're going to pack a bunch more of them in, and we'll have a ton of fun trying to solve this investigation, the approach of Azathoth. Thank you guys so much for your support, and as always, keep on rolling solo.